It was a long day for Hania, and she could feel it in her legs. She had been working since early morning, moving from table to table without a moment to rest. The hotel restaurant was always busy, but today it felt even heavier. There was a big conference happening in the building, and guests were arriving from different countries. Some were polite, some were impatient, and some barely noticed the staff at all. But Hania kept her smile, because she knew her work mattered. She didn't come for money, and every shift helped her support her family. Just as she wiped a table near the window, her manager walked up quickly and whispered, "VIP arriving. Be attentive. All right?" She nodded, not thinking too much of it. VIP guests came often here. Most were business travelers with stiff expressions and demanding voices. But when she turned toward the entrance, she immediately noticed him. A tall man in a dark suit walked in with a certain presence, the kind that made everyone shift their attention without meaning to. He didn't smile. He barely looked around. He just moved straight to a corner table as if he owned the place. The manager hurried to greet him and guided him to a seat, speaking politely. The man gave short answers, his tone sharp but low. Other staff members whispered quietly. They recognized him. He was famous in the business world, a billionaire investor known for transforming companies but also for his strict personality. His name was known in many countries, especially in the Middle East. Hania tried not to let her nerves show. She had served many people before, kind ones, rude ones, confused ones, even lonely ones. But something about this man felt different. He seemed like someone who did not tolerate mistakes, not even small ones. She took a deep breath, straightened her apron, and walked toward him with a calm expression. "Good afternoon, sir. May I help you with your order?" she asked. He didn't look up right away. He was scrolling through something on his phone, breathing out with frustration. A few seconds later, he glanced up at her. "Water," he said in English, his tone cold. "Of course, sir." She wrote it down out of habit, even though it was a simple request. As she turned to walk away, she heard him mutter something under his breath in Arabic. It was quick, but she understood every word. He assumed she would not. Most people in this city wouldn't understand Arabic anyway, but she did. It was a part of her past, a part she kept quiet at work. He spoke quietly, but the words were sharp enough to cut. "These workers are so slow. I don't have time for this." Hania almost stopped walking, but she kept moving. Her heart squeezed a little. It wasn't the first time she heard something rude from a customer. But somehow, knowing that he felt comfortable insulting her in a language he assumed she couldn't understand made it sting more. She brought the water to his table, placing it gently. He didn't thank her. He just continued scrolling through his phone with a frown. A few minutes passed and he called her again, this time raising his hand slightly. "I need the menu." "Right away," she replied. She gave him the menu, and again he mumbled something in Arabic. Something about how he hoped the food here wouldn't be as disappointing as the service. Hania bit the inside of her cheek. She didn't want to lose her professionalism. She needed this job. She needed the income. But the words echoed in her mind. She walked back to the counter, trying to shake off the feeling. Another server noticed her expression. "Everything okay?" he whispered. "Yes," she said softly. She didn't want to complain. People had worse problems. But as she stood there, she couldn't help but remember her past. She had lived in the Middle East for several years when she was younger. Her family moved there for work, and she grew up speaking Arabic fluently. She learned the culture, the expressions, even the accents. But after moving again, she rarely used the language. It stayed quietly in her heart, like an old memory. Now, hearing it used against her in such a disrespectful way made her chest tighten. She served other tables for a while, giving them warm smiles and friendly service. But every time she walked past the billionaire's table, she felt his eyes watching every small action. His impatience was heavy in the air. At one point, he received a phone call. His voice grew even sharper. "No, this is unacceptable," he said loudly in English. "I told you to fix that contract today, not tomorrow." People at nearby tables glanced over. Hania kept her distance but could hear everything. He was clearly under a lot of pressure. and she wondered, just for a moment, if that pressure was the reason he was so tense. But still, stress didn't give anyone the right to insult someone doing their job. Eventually, he waved her over again. He didn't wait for her to greet him. "Bring me the grilled chicken platter. Would you like anything on the side?" she asked. He sighed, annoyed. "I said the grilled chicken platter. Isn't that clear?" Her cheeks warmed, but she nodded. "Yes, sir. Coming right up." She placed the order quickly in the kitchen. The chefs began preparing it, but there were several other orders ahead. It would take a bit of time. Hania checked on other tables and avoided walking too close to him until necessary. She didn't want to make him any more irritated. But after only a few minutes, he called her again. "Why is my food taking this long?" "The kitchen is a little busy, sir." "It won't be too long," she explained calmly. He muttered in Arabic again, this time louder than before. Words about how the staff must be poorly trained, how service here was pathetic. Something inside her cracked just a little. She took a slow breath, reminding herself to be patient. As she walked back toward the kitchen, she heard another staff member whisper, "I heard he's one of the toughest businessmen around. People say he's impossible to please." Another replied, "Well, he's definitely living up to that reputation." Hania didn't respond. She only kept thinking about the words he said. She didn't want anger to take over her heart. She believed in kindness, even when it wasn't returned. The dish was finally ready. She placed it carefully on a tray and carried it out, keeping her posture steady. When she walked toward him, he looked up again with that same annoyed expression. She gently set the plate in front of him. "Your grilled chicken platter, sir." He didn't say anything at first, just stared at the food as if waiting for something to be wrong. Then he exhaled sharply. "About time," he muttered, and again he said it in Arabic. This time, something shifted inside her. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional. She simply felt a quiet strength rise within her. A strength she hadn't felt in a long time. She stepped back and watched him eat for a moment. She noticed how tired he looked, how his hands shook slightly when he lifted his fork, how he grabbed his phone again and frowned at a message. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it reminded her that people often hurt others when they themselves are hurting. Still, she knew she couldn't let the disrespect continue. Not for her and not for anyone on the staff. She walked away quietly, thinking about what she might say and when. She didn't want to embarrass him. She didn't want to create a scene, but she wanted to stand up for herself, even gently. As she moved toward another table, she whispered to herself in Arabic, so soft that no one could hear. "You think I don't understand, but I do." And for the first time that day, she felt a small spark of confidence return to her chest. Hania tried to keep her focus on work, but her mind kept drifting back to the man in the corner. No matter how many tables she served or how many smiles she offered, she could still hear his voice in her head. The irritated tone, the quiet muttering in Arabic, the dismissive comments he thought she couldn't understand. She wiped her hands on her apron and took a slow breath, trying to clear her thoughts. The restaurant remained busy, but the rush began to settle as the afternoon moved forward. A few guests left, some new ones arrived, and the soft sound of cutlery and conversations filled the air. Yet the presence of the billionaire lingered like heavy air behind her. She couldn't ignore it, even when she wasn't facing him. She noticed how the other staff avoided his table unless absolutely necessary. Even the manager, who was usually confident with difficult guests, seemed unusually cautious around him. That alone said a lot. People didn't get nervous for no reason. Hania glanced in his direction once more. He looked tense, his hand pressed against his forehead as if he had a headache. His phone kept ringing, and each time he picked it up, his voice grew more impatient. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried enough sharpness to make a person flinch. At one point, he dropped a document on the table accidentally, and it slid to the floor. He let out a long breath through his nose, but didn't pick it up. He simply stared at it as if even bending down was too much to handle. Hania didn't rush over, but she took a moment to walk by slowly, crouching down to pick the paper up gently. "Here you go, sir," she said. He didn't thank her. He just nodded slightly, but even that looked forced. His pride was tightly wrapped around him like a thick layer of armor. When she walked away, she heard him whisper in Arabic again. Less angry this time, more defeated. Everything is falling apart today, even small things. It made her pause for a moment. The tone was different, not harsh, not insulting, just tired. She turned away and kept walking, but the shift in his voice stayed in her thoughts. She didn't want to feel sympathy for someone who had disrespected her. But she also knew that people had stories behind their moods, stories that stayed hidden from strangers. As she moved behind the counter to refill a tray of glasses, the older server, who had worked here longer than anyone, approached her. "You're doing well," he said softly. "Don't let guests like him upset you." She nodded. "I'm trying. He's known for being tough," the older server continued. "But he's going through something. I heard the manager say he arrived earlier than planned because of some problem with his company." Hania didn't respond. She didn't want excuses for rude behavior, but at the same time, she understood that stress didn't always come alone. It often brought out the worst parts of people. Still, it didn't give him the right to talk down to her. Her mind went back to the comments he made about her being slow, untrained, unworthy of attention. She kept telling herself she wouldn't let it affect her, but she could feel its weight. She took a sip of water in the break corner and closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered her early years in the Middle East. A small apartment where the smell of spices filled the air, children playing outside, the warm rhythm of the Arabic language around her every day. She remembered her friends, their laughter, and the welcoming neighborhood that made her feel at home. Arabic wasn't just a language for her. It was part of her childhood, part of who she was. And now, hearing it used like a weapon against her, it hurt in a way she didn't expect. Her break didn't last long. The restaurant needed her. She placed her glass down, took a deep breath and walked back out. When she approached the corner again, she saw the billionaire with his head down, elbows on the table, staring at something on his screen. His expression had changed. It was still tense but also heavy, like someone carrying a weight too big to hide. Just as she thought he was calming down, he suddenly hit the table lightly with the side of his fist. Not in anger, but in frustration. His phone vibrated again. He picked it up and spoke in Arabic, his voice tight. "I told you to handle it. I don't have time for more problems. No, I can't fly back today. I'm already here." A pause. "Just do whatever you can. Please." That last word didn't sound like something he used often. He lowered the phone slowly, closing his eyes for a moment. Hania watched with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. Something was wrong in his life. Very wrong. But she walked away again, returning to work. She didn't want him to think she was listening. As time passed, she focused on other customers, bringing fresh bread baskets and clearing empty plates. She tried to shift her attention away from him, but the small moments kept pulling her back. At one point, a group of tourists laughed loudly at a nearby table, and he lifted his head with a deep frown, as if the noise physically bothered him. He rubbed his temples again. When she brought warm towels to a different table, she heard him mutter something quietly. Not to her, not even to complain. More like he was thinking out loud. "If one more thing goes wrong today." Hania didn't know what he meant, but she sensed something fragile beneath the hard exterior he showed the world. The thought surprised her. People like him were always seen as powerful, unshakable, almost untouchable. But in this moment, he looked like someone fighting an invisible battle. Still, she couldn't forget his earlier insults. She couldn't forget the disrespect she felt. A person's stress didn't excuse their behavior. She continued working, serving drinks, delivering orders, and checking on tables with steady calmness. But her mind kept circling back to the idea of dignity, about standing up for herself. Not in anger, but in honesty. If she stayed silent, he would never know that she understood everything he had said. He would never know he had spoken in front of someone who held his same language like a treasure. A voice inside her whispered quietly, "You don't have to yell. You don't have to embarrass him. Just speak the truth." But another part of her wondered if confronting someone so powerful was worth the risk. What if he complained to the manager? What if she lost her job? What if he reacted badly? Her stomach tightened at the thought. Her family depended on her income. She couldn't afford to take big risks. She moved to the kitchen to pick up fresh dishes. The chef, a friendly man with a calm voice, asked her, "Everything okay out there?" She hesitated. Mostly, he repeated. She smiled faintly. Just one difficult customer. He nodded knowingly. They come and go. Don't let one person ruin your day. I'll try, she said softly. She stepped out again, carrying plates to another table. But just as she walked past the billionaire's table, she heard a sound. One that made her stop without thinking. He was coughing harshly, not because of food, not choking, but more like someone trying to catch their breath while stress sat heavy on their chest. She glanced quickly, but he waved her off with a small gesture, clearly not wanting attention. Hania didn't move closer, but she didn't walk away either. Something about his struggle made her heart ache a little, despite everything. He had insulted her. He had spoken with no respect. But he was still human. Still, she kept enough distance to respect his space. As she watched him, she realized something important. She had been thinking about that moment when she would speak up. Maybe she imagined it too dramatically, like confronting him suddenly, surprising him and making him understand he was wrong. But now, watching him look so tired and frustrated, she knew the moment needed care. She didn't want to lash out. She didn't want to embarrass him. She only wanted to speak with honesty. She wanted him to understand that his words carried weight, that the people serving him were human too. As she placed cutlery on another table, she made a quiet decision. When the right moment came, she would speak to him in Arabic. Not out of anger, but out of dignity. She didn't know when that moment would be. She didn't know how he would react. But she felt a calm confidence growing in her chest. The day moved slowly, with the light outside turning softer. Hania kept working, but she was more aware than ever. Every step, every glance, every small whisper in Arabic that floated from his table. It all added to the growing understanding between them, even though he didn't know it yet. He thought she was just another waitress who didn't understand him. But he was wrong, and soon he would find out. The afternoon slowly moved toward evening, and the restaurant lights grew softer as the sun lowered outside the large windows. Hania felt the shift in the air, the way the noise of the dining hall calmed just a little, as if the world outside was reminding people to slow down. But for her, the heaviness from earlier still lingered quietly in her chest. She walked to the counter to refill a tray of drinks when she noticed the billionaire lift his hand again. This time not sharply, but tiredly, as though even small gestures took effort. It was strange seeing someone so powerful look so drained. She wasn't sure if she should go right away, but she took a slow breath and walked to his table. "Yes, sir?" she asked. He didn't look angry now, just frustrated, weighed down by something she could not see. His brows pressed together as he looked at the nearly empty plate in front of him. "I asked for extra sauce earlier," he said. His voice was still a little sharp, but not as harsh as before. Hania knew he hadn't asked. Maybe he meant to, or maybe he assumed he had. Today seemed like the kind of day where even small things slipped from his mind. "I'll get it right away," she replied. He didn't respond, but she felt him watching her as she walked toward the kitchen. She grabbed a small dipping bowl and filled it carefully, making sure the presentation looked neat. She didn't want to give him any reason to complain. When she returned and set the bowl down, he nodded slightly. Not a real thank you, just a wordless acknowledgement. For a moment, she wondered if he was trying in his own quiet way. Maybe an emotional storm inside him was clouding everything. She stepped back, ready to leave, but then she heard him mutter something under his breath again in Arabic. At least something is going right. It wasn't an insult this time, just a tired whisper. Hania walked away, unsure how to feel. He had hurt her earlier, but now he just looked like a man fighting through a long day of bad news. Her heart softened slightly, but she reminded herself, respect mattered no matter what someone was going through. She continued her rounds, clearing tables and checking on guests. She noticed a family laughing together, a couple leaning close over a shared dessert, and a traveler sitting alone reading a book. Real, simple moments of life happening around her. Moments that felt peaceful compared to the storm she sensed at the corner table. When she passed by again, the billionaire was hunched over his phone, scrolling through long messages and shaking his head. At one point, he rubbed his eyes with 2 fingers and took a shaky breath. He looked defeated. She wasn't watching him to judge him. She just saw a human being who seemed like he had reached his limit. But every time she remembered the insulting comments he made earlier, her chest tightened again. That small sting of disrespect didn't fade easily. She walked back to the counter and stood still for a moment, letting her heartbeat settle. She had been thinking for hours about speaking to him in Arabic. Not to shame him, but to remind him that the people he looked down on had their own stories, their own strength. She wanted to say something that was honest, calm, and respectful. Something that might reach him, but she didn't want to do it out of frustration. She wanted to do it when her heart felt steady. She looked at him again from a distance. His shoulders were slouched, his fingers tapping nervously against the table. His eyes seemed heavy. Maybe this was the moment, not to confront him sharply, but to speak truth gently. Hania placed her order pad aside, wiped her hands again, and took a quiet breath. Her heart beat faster as she walked slowly toward his table. She didn't know how he would react, but she knew she wasn't doing anything wrong. Sometimes people needed to hear a truth they weren't expecting. She stopped next to his table. "Sir," she said softly. He looked up, surprised. "Yes." She felt a small tremble in her chest, but she steadied her voice. In clear, calm Arabic, she said, "I understood everything you said earlier." His eyes widened instantly. His hand froze around his fork. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe for a long moment. His entire expression shifted. Shock, confusion, then embarrassment washed across his face. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Slowly, he set his fork down. She continued, still calm and polite. "I did not say anything because I understand people can have stressful days. But I want you to know that the staff here try very hard. We respect our guests. We hope to receive respect in return." The entire air around the table changed. It felt like the room had become quieter, even though the restaurant was still full. A few guests glanced over curiously, sensing something, though they didn't understand the language. The billionaire swallowed hard. The arrogance from earlier was completely gone. His face softened, and he looked human. Vulnerable. "You speak Arabic?" he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," she replied gently. "Very well." He looked down at his hands, as if shame settled over him like a heavy blanket. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. He looked like someone who suddenly saw his own actions clearly. "I didn't know," he murmured. "I know," she replied. "But even if I didn't understand the language, it still would have hurt." His shoulders dropped. He seemed smaller somehow, not in presence, but in pride. For a moment, he didn't look like a billionaire or a powerful businessman or someone feared by his staff. He looked like a man who realized he had crossed a line. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, and it sounded real. Hania nodded softly. She didn't need anything more from him. She only needed him to understand. But something else surprised her. He wasn't just embarrassed. He looked hurt in a different way, like her words had touched a soft place inside him he hadn't expected. "I shouldn't have spoken like that," he added, almost to himself. "It's been a difficult day, but that's no excuse." His voice cracked just slightly at the end. Hania felt a shift inside her. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't even tense. She just felt a quiet understanding. An understanding that sometimes people break in places no one sees. She wanted to end the moment gently, not harshly. "You don't have to explain everything," she said. "Just remember that the people serving you are trying their best." He nodded slowly, still unable to meet her eyes. She stepped back politely. "If you need anything else, I'll be nearby." He didn't answer. He just sat there, staring at the table as if replaying every word he had said earlier. His jaw tightened, not with anger, but regret. Hania walked away quietly, her heart beating fast but steady. She felt lighter, as if she had carried a weight all day and finally set it down. The older server approached her after a moment. "Everything okay?" he whispered. She nodded. "Yes." He smiled faintly. "Good. You look calmer now." And she was. A few minutes later, she noticed the billionaire sitting with his hands folded, not touching his food. He seemed deep in thought. Every now and then, he looked around the restaurant, his expression softer than before. He looked different. As she refilled glasses at a nearby table, she heard one of the guests whisper to another. "Something changed with that man. He looks humbled." Hania didn't react, but she felt something warm settle in her chest. The restaurant moved on with its usual rhythm. Dishes clinking, guests chatting, servers calling out orders. But something meaningful had happened in that small corner. A wall had cracked. Person had changed. Not completely, not magically, but enough to feel real. As the evening light dimmed further, Hania glanced at him once more. He was no longer frowning or muttering. He sat quietly, breathing slowly, looking out the window as if trying to gather himself. She didn't know what he was thinking, but she knew one thing. He would never forget this moment, and neither would she. Part 4 content will be written here in simple, human-sounding English around 1400 words, continuing smoothly from Part 3. The evening carried a strange calm inside the restaurant, even though many people were still coming in and going out. The waitress tried her best to stay focused on her work, but her thoughts kept circling around the strange moment earlier. She had spoken fluent Arabic to defend herself, and the wealthy man who had insulted her was completely shocked. She could still picture the expression on his face, the way he froze like someone had stopped time around him. She felt proud, but not in a loud way. It was a quiet and warm feeling, the kind she didn't show on her face. Her job mattered to her. She didn't work there because she loved waiting tables, but because she needed to help her family and save for her future. Every shift mattered. Every coin mattered. And she didn't want any drama that could risk her job. That was why she kept telling herself to stay calm. But deep inside, she could tell this wasn't the end of it. Something about that man made her feel he would come back or react in some other surprising way. He didn't look like someone who left things unresolved. People like him usually controlled everything, and losing control, even for a moment, bothered them more than they admitted. She tried to shake off the thought and went back to cleaning one of the tables near the window. Outside, cars rushed by, lights flashed, and the cool evening wind pressed against the glass. For a few minutes, she felt the world settle again. But that peace didn't last long. The restaurant door opened, and a different kind of silence slipped inside. She didn't turn immediately, but she sensed it. The manager turned his head. Two customers at a table paused their conversation. Even the cooks in the kitchen seemed to move more quietly. She finally looked up, and there he was. The billionaire had returned. He walked in slowly, not with anger, not with pride, but with a thoughtful and almost nervous expression. It was surprising to see someone of his status looking unsure. He carried himself like a man who wasn't used to being questioned. But today something had humbled him. There was something heavy in his eyes, something that wasn't there earlier. She didn't move closer, but he approached her on his own. For a second, she wondered if he was angry, embarrassed, or just trying to show authority again. But when he stood in front of her, his voice was softer than she expected. "I came back to talk," he said. It was calm, slow, and sincere. She didn't say anything yet. She waited, letting him speak first. He continued, "Earlier, I said things I shouldn't have said. I judged you without any reason. I spoke without thinking. And then you answered me in a way I did not expect. I want to understand how you learned Arabic so well." She could feel the eyes of a few co-workers watching, but she didn't want to make a scene. She glanced toward the back hallway and quietly said, "We can talk over there, not in front of everyone." He nodded quickly, almost gratefully. They walked to a small corner of the restaurant where staff sometimes took their short breaks. It wasn't private, but it was quiet enough. He stood there for a moment before speaking again. "You surprised me," he said. "Your Arabic is not just fluent. It's perfect." She kept her voice steady. "My mother taught me. She worked in a household in the Middle East for many years, and I spent some of my childhood there. It was part of my life." Her words seemed to soften him even more. His shoulders relaxed a little, and his harsh expression from earlier was completely gone. "I see," he said quietly. "I assumed things about you. I spoke as if I knew your story. But I did not." She nodded. "It happens. People assume things all the time. But it still hurts. And no one deserves to be spoken to like that." He lowered his gaze for the first time since arriving. "You're right," he said. "And that is why I came back. Not just to apologize, but because I want to understand. It has been a long time since anyone has spoken to me the way you did. Firm, but respectful. You didn't respond with anger. You responded with strength." She didn't know what to say to that. She hadn't meant to impress him. She only wanted to defend her dignity. They stood in silence for a few seconds until she finally said, "I forgive you, but please don't speak to anyone like that again. Not just me. Anyone." He nodded slowly, almost like a student learning a lesson. "I will remember that." Then, unexpectedly, he asked something she didn't see coming. "May I sit here for a moment? I want to tell you something." She hesitated. She didn't want to get too personal with a customer, especially someone who had insulted her earlier. But there was something honest in his voice. Something different. She quietly gestured to the chair, and he sat. He took a long breath before speaking. "You may not believe this, but I wasn't always like this. I wasn't always cold or impatient or dismissive. Life changed me in ways I didn't expect. And I suppose I forgot how to speak kindly." She didn't interrupt. She let him continue. "For years I lived in different countries," he said. "I learned many languages, met many people, saw many cultures. But somewhere along that journey, I began losing the ability to trust, to listen, to respect. Everything became competition, power, fear. I thought I was protecting myself, but I was only turning into someone I didn't recognize." She listened quietly. His voice wasn't dramatic or emotional, but it carried weight. The words sounded like they were taken from real experiences, real pain. "And today," he continued, "when you spoke to me in Arabic, it reminded me of a different time in my life, a time when I felt safe, a time when I felt understood. It shook me, because I did not expect a stranger to remind me of that." She shifted slightly, unsure how to respond. "Life gets hard for everyone," she said. "We all change, sometimes for the better, sometimes not. But we can always fix things. We can always get better." He smiled faintly, almost like someone who hadn't smiled sincerely in a long time. "You speak with such calm. It's rare." She shook her head. "I'm just someone trying to handle my life. Nothing special." He looked at her with a kind of respect she hadn't seen earlier. "You are more special than you think," he said. "And I am sorry for how I treated you today." She nodded again. "Thank you for apologizing. That's enough for me." He slowly stood from the chair. "I don't want to disturb your work, but before I leave, may I ask your name?" She hesitated once more. Sharing her name with him felt like crossing a line she didn't want to cross yet. She took a quiet breath and said, "Maybe another day. Not today." He paused, surprised, but then nodded respectfully. "Fair enough." He walked back toward the main area of the restaurant, but before leaving, he turned around slightly. "You have changed something in my day," he said. "More than you know." Then he left. The waitress stood there long after he was gone, wondering what exactly had started between them. She didn't trust him yet. She didn't even know what he wanted from her. But she could tell this wasn't the end. Something important had been set in motion. And deep inside, she felt that part of her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. She walked back to the counter, picking up her notebook and taking orders again. But her thoughts were far away, circling around the question she didn't dare ask herself. Why did he come back? And what would he do next? The night moved forward, but her heart kept replaying the same moment. The moment he froze when she spoke his language. Little did she know, Part 5 of her story was about to unfold in an even more surprising way. Part 5 content will be written here in simple, human, natural English around 1400 words. The next morning came quietly, with soft light slipping through the clouds and settling over the busy city. The waitress woke up earlier than usual. She didn't know why. Maybe her mind hadn't rested well. Maybe she kept thinking about what had happened the previous evening. The apology, the unexpected conversation, and the strange softness she had seen in the billionaire's eyes. She sat on the edge of her bed, feet touching the cool floor, and took a long breath. Her home was small but warm. It wasn't perfect, but it held memories, laughter, and her mother's voice telling her to stay strong no matter what life brought. That thought gave her strength. She got ready for work, tied her hair back, put on her simple uniform, and walked to the restaurant. Her steps felt different today. She wasn't nervous, but she was alert, almost as if she expected something big to happen. When she entered the restaurant, the morning shift was already underway. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread and warm spices. A few early customers sat quietly, sipping tea and reading newspapers. Everything looked normal, but something in the air felt slightly different. The manager waved at her. "Good morning," he said, smiling. "Busy day ahead." She nodded and placed her bag in the staff area. Then she began setting tables, cleaning menus, and welcoming customers. The familiar rhythm of her work helped her relax. But that calm lasted only an hour. Just as she placed a plate on a table near the window, the door opened. The billionaire walked in. He wasn't in his usual sharp suit. Instead, he wore simple clothes, a light jacket, plain shirt, and comfortable shoes. He looked more like an ordinary person than someone powerful enough to change an entire company with a single decision. He noticed her immediately, and instead of looking away or pretending not to see her, he offered a quiet, respectful nod. She didn't react quickly. Her mind froze for a second, surprised to see him back again so soon. But she reminded herself to stay calm and professional. She walked toward him. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," he replied. "I hope I'm not disturbing your shift. I only came to ask something." She raised an eyebrow slightly, unsure where this was going. He continued, "I want to talk. Not about yesterday. Not about what happened. Something else. Something important." She waited quietly. Her silence encouraged him to speak more. He cleared his throat gently. "I would like your help with something. And if you refuse, I will understand completely." She folded her hands politely. "What kind of help?" He glanced around the restaurant, noticing the customers. "Maybe we can speak outside? Only for a minute." She hesitated. She didn't want to leave her shift or break any rules. But the manager noticed them and approached. The manager smiled softly. "If you need to step out for a few minutes, go ahead. I'll cover your tables." She appreciated his understanding and nodded. "All right," she told the billionaire. They stepped outside. The street was bright and filled with the morning rush. Cars passing quickly, people hurrying to work, vendors calling out prices for fresh fruit. They stood near the side of the building where it was quieter. He took a slow breath. "Yesterday, after leaving the restaurant, I thought a lot about what you said, about respect, about change. I realized something." She listened, her expression calm and open. He continued, "People in my life rarely speak honestly to me. They don't correct me. They don't challenge me. Everyone behaves as if I am always right. But yesterday you didn't. And instead of feeling insulted, I felt something different. I felt grateful." She looked at him with slight surprise. "I wasn't trying to teach you anything," she said. "I just wanted to stand up for myself." "That's exactly why it mattered," he replied quietly. "It was real. It was human. And it reminded me of someone I once knew." She waited, not wanting to interrupt whatever he was trying to say. He finally spoke again. "I have a charity project," he said. "It connects workers from different backgrounds, especially those who moved from one country to another. They face language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, and unfair treatment. I started it years ago, but recently I lost focus. I haven't been present for it. I haven't given it attention. She didn't understand yet where she fit into this. He continued, I want to restart the program, this time with new ideas. And I want someone who understands life from both sides. Someone who knows what it feels like to struggle with identity, language, and belonging. Someone like you. Her eyes widened slightly. Me? She asked. But I'm just a waitress. He shook his head. No, you're someone who sees people. You're someone who knows what respect truly means. And you understand more than you think. She looked down for a moment, unsure how to respond. He gently added, I want you to help me as an advisor, not full-time, not something that will affect your job. Just a small role where your perspective can make a difference. Even if it's just meeting once a week. Even if it's just sharing your thoughts. She felt overwhelmed. She had never imagined she would be asked something like this. Her life had always been simple: work, home, helping her family, saving money. She never saw herself in any special position. I don't know, she said honestly. I don't think I'm the right person. I don't have experience for this. He looked at her with gentle certainty. Experience is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for wisdom. And you have it. She felt her heart soften. She still didn't fully believe in herself, but his words felt genuine. After a long pause, she finally spoke. If I agree, what exactly would I have to do? He smiled softly, relieved that she didn't reject the idea immediately. Just share your thoughts, he said. Tell me what you notice. Help me understand what life looks like from your side. You don't need to speak perfectly. You don't need to impress anyone. I just want honesty. She thought deeply. Part of her felt nervous. Part of her felt scared. But another part, quiet yet brave, felt ready. All right, she said at last. I can try. Only try. His face brightened with real gratitude. That's more than enough. They stood there for a few seconds. Their silence felt comfortable this time, not tense. Then she asked something small but sincere. Why me? You could choose someone trained, someone with more knowledge. His answer was simple. Because truth is rare. And you have it. A gentle silence followed. Finally, she said, I need to go back to work. He nodded. Of course. And thank you. Truly. Before she turned, he added softly, one day, when you're ready, I would still like to know your name. For the first time, she smiled with real warmth. Maybe one day, she said. She walked back inside the restaurant. But something inside her had shifted. Her steps felt lighter. Her heart felt stronger. Her future, which once looked repetitive and predictable, now looked open. Full of paths she never knew she could walk. She returned to her shift, taking orders and serving customers. But throughout the day, her mind kept replaying the conversation. A new chapter was waiting for her, and she could almost feel it taking shape. As the evening light fell across the restaurant windows, she paused for a moment, looking outside. That day, something extraordinary happened. A simple waitress had changed a billionaire. And without meaning to, she had changed her own life too. The story that began with an insult had turned into something unexpected, something meaningful. Maybe kindness really did change people. Maybe courage could open doors. Maybe speaking with respect, even in difficult moments, could reshape someone's heart. As she wiped a table and prepared for closing time, she whispered to herself softly, maybe this is just the beginning.